So here the Americans play an excellent battle deck card as they trigger a heavy machine gun platoon ambush. Sergeant Barcelone pours heavy fire into the Japanese position, double fives to hit, and then double six to beat the firepower test for dug-in, destroying 2 of the 4 machine guns. In return, the Japanese pour heavy fire back into them, supported by indirect fire support. This destroys 3 out of the 8 elements, plus also destroys an additional 4 troops. The sniper now relocates away from the center, and here on the left flank, we see the Americans starting to push forward and push indirect fire down, obscuring the Japanese artillery observers. In the center, they get a lucky hit with armored piercing, knocking out the roadblock, but not the observer. And here they put 11 from the heavy machine guns onto the platoon, pinning them. On the left flank, the Zeros have a go at the stewards, but AAA fire knocks out one of them, and the second Zero fails to score any hits. Big blow for the Japanese. On the American right flank, things aren't going so well, with 3 elements destroyed, 1 saved by the medic, and other units knocked out. Meanwhile, the Japanese continue to hold the position. Only Sergeant Barcelone on his own on the right flank can he play the hero yet again. Here we see one of the landing craft that's been hit by a regimental 70mm gun. Meanwhile, in the center, 2 out of the 4 machine guns have been wiped out, and the Japanese now start smoking off the right flank of the American assault in order to cover their own troops back and the central platoon. Here we see the rear of the American position being attacked, but unsuccessful. So round 9 sees a lot of heavy action, starting here on the American left flank. They smoked off the artillery observer. He's pulled back to the bank with the intention of trying to swim the river the following round. On the bridge, they get a lucky hit from the stewards with their armor piercing, knocking out the obstacle, but it didn't take care of the observation post, which in turn puts down a smoke screen in front of the advancing Americans, securing and covering the flank of the infantry platoon, which is holding the middle in the logging camp. The Zeros attempted to bomb the rear of the stewards. However, they lost 1 to the stewards' anti-aircraft machine guns, and the second Zero failed to score any hits. A big impact there against the Japanese forces. However, in the center, it was a big success for the Japanese. They took some heavy incoming fire from the 50 cals, got 11 hits on them, which pinned them. However, they made a successful roll, and then put down heavy fire plus 3 light mortars, which have a huge impact, destroying half the machine gun platoon. Luckily, they survived the morale. On the right flank, eventually the left sections managed to push back the enemy sniper, and he is relocated. However, on the hard right flank, they run into an ambush of 4 heavy machine guns in a defensive position. Luckily for the Americans, they have Sergeant Barcelone of the US Marine Corps, a specialist with a 30 cal, who managed to destroy one of the positions. However, the machine guns in return destroy 3 US units. One is saved by the medic, but indirect fire from the regimental 70mm guns knocks out one of the very lightly armoured landing specialist vehicles, which was required for the assault. So this is the end of turn 9. Very interesting stage in the game. So let's see where we go as we move into turn 10. So we're now about to move into round 10. This is going to be a very interesting round for the Americans, who are under a lot of pressure, particularly on the right flank, having lost 40% of the platoon and one of the amphibious craft. Luckily they have the medic, but very limited fire support, as the mortars last round had to pull into the jungle to avoid air attack from the Zeros. So here we go, round 10. So at the start of round 10, the US mortar platoon learned their lesson, and rather than continue risking fire and threat from Zeros, decide to dig in and sacrifice a round of firing. They'll be ready for round 11. The Stuarts, they decided to take a chance on the left flank and just drive hell for leather straight through the smoke up against the right flank of the dug-in Japanese infantry platoon and fire both HE and their machine guns into the platoon, scoring significant hits, reasonable number of casualties. However, given that the Japanese are dug in, the canister HE only has a firepower of 6, making it very, very difficult, and no casualties are actually taken on the Japanese. The platoon that took heavy casualties on the right flank have pulled back and got into the river itself and to give them some cover, and they're now moving up on the left flank of the Japanese infantry platoon. Fortunately for the Americans, they got some reserves, a full platoon of Marines coming up. They're going to take that right flank. However, in the centre, the company commander and 2 heavy machine guns are preparing for a possible banzai attack. These spotting team from the 75 mils decides it's far too risky and they're going to swim the river. They take a skill test. Fortunately, they pass. However, the river is proving quite difficult, so they're only moving at about 3 inches ago. It's going to take them some time to get across. Meanwhile, the surviving Zero, she comes back in again on the Stuarts, survives anti-aircraft fire, hits, re-rolls, hits, takes through the firepower with a bomb on the top armour, destroying the lead tank there. This is putting the Americans under pressure, down to 3 tanks, and a possible banzai assault in the next round. Is this the end of the Stuarts? So excellent work by the Japanese Zeros, and we're now into turn 11. Question here, will the Japanese platoon go for a banzai attack either on the company command group and the 2 machine guns, or will they take the chances against the canister of the 3 remaining M3 Stuarts, which are isolated without infantry support due to the platoon still being pinned down in the village? So 2 interesting cards this round. The Americans get a supply drop, and let's see what that's going to be. And the Japanese, they get a very interesting card where they've got civilian population livestock on the road. That's really going to play havoc, I guess, with the American armour, who are trying to push up towards the right flank of the platoon. So let's see how these 2 cards play out. So over on the left flank, it's absolute chaos for the Americans. Their armour is all now snarled up with the civilian population that started fleeing the village. This was a battle deck card played by the Japanese. Great call by them, really making a big problem. The Americans have managed to unpin their infantry. They've spotted the guys swimming across the river, and in a very unsporting manner to attempt to have a quick pop at them. Unfortunately for the Americans, they do get 1 hit on them, but fail to cause any casualties. So the very good swimming observer team live to fight another day, or at least another round. Over on the American right flank, the platoon commander searches out Sergeant Bassalon to get a full update on the Japanese heavy machine gun platoon and come up with some formulated plan of how he's going to actually take out that position, which is extremely well dug in and has got interlocking arcs of fire. Well, that Japanese platoon has an excellent flanking position onto the Americans, which we now observe through using the periscope. They're preparing to pour fire into the American flank, and that's really going to cause them some big challenges. They're currently unsighted. Here we see the periscope in use again to guarantee that line of sight. Big. However, the Americans are fortunate and they spot them to call in naval gunfire support from a heavy cruiser. This absolutely pounds the Japanese position, causing a number of casualties and actually penetrating the dug-in positions with the heavy shells. 1 section is now destroyed, leaving them. So American firepower starting to take its toll. This time the American platoon calls in and brings down naval gunfire support. This is a heavy cruiser, so very little chance of survival even though they're dug in. The Japanese very fortunate to make some saves, but firepower straight through and another heavy machine gun falls. The platoon is now at just over 50%. The left flank for the Japanese looking very, very weak. Here in the centre, the American tracker dog fails its skill test to spot and identify the Japanese sniper, so he's still unsighted and they're going to come under direct fire very shortly. Sadly for the Japanese, due to the heavy naval gunfire, they lost the flanking MG, which was putting some very nice enfilade fire from a defilade position onto the American platoon. This is going to be very challenging for the Japanese. Let's see what happens in the centre. Do we see a Banzai attack, or do we see another steward knocked out from our ever infamous Zero? Over on the American left flank, it's total carnage. The Zero, having run out of bombs, has gone for a strafing run with MGs. She hits the middle tank, but fails to get its firepower. The crew bail. We got civilians all caught up in the middle. Now we got civilian dead and wounded. Total disregard by the Japanese forces there as they go strafing down the line. It's going to be very challenging for the Americans, now down to less than half strength in terms of actual combat power. Let's see what happens as we move into round 12. Americans play a cracking card here, which is a friendly fire from aircraft, forcing the Zero away from the nearby stewards onto a strafing run onto the Japanese infantry. The Americans are, very pleased with themselves. They think this is going to have a big impact. The Japanese, major problem, until the Americans find out that the Japanese have been sitting on a joker card and they play it out and luckily abort the gun run. This is a very fortunate turn of events and a great piece of play, holding a joker back for some 10 rounds by the Japanese. So this is where we leave the end of turn 13. Here on the American right, it is totally clear. The final Japanese positions have been swept away by the use of heavy indirect gunfire from their cruisers. This allows them now to start preparing for the assault across the river. That's going to be extremely challenging, especially as here in the centre, one Japanese infantry platoon remains a thorn very much in the side by holding the central position. This luckily aborted gun run, well played deck both by the Americans on diverting the aircraft for friendly fire and the Japanese holding back a joker card to play it right at the last safe moment. Here on the American left flank, the anti-tank platoon making very slow progress. The infantry platoon now on pin, pushing up towards the bridge, still held up a little bit by civilians. The tanks have started to shake themselves out, and really what we've got is one isolated but well dug in infantry platoon. So 13 rounds now complete. The Americans getting close to bouncing the bridge and preparing for the assault across the river. However, enemy air power, whilst no bombs, still remains a threat. And this platoon in the middle has got to be destroyed because the Americans cannot afford to leave it on their flank, or certainly not in their rear. So all to play for as we move in to round 14.
Ob stürmt oder schneit, ob die Sonne uns sagt, der Tag glühend heiß oder eiskalt die Nacht. Bestaubt sind die Gesichter